It's finally here, the adaptation of the most subversive video game sequel in history, The Last of Us Season 2. I've simultaneously both been dreading this and looking forward to it. Dreading it because I knew it meant I would finally have to finish The Last of Us Part 2, and I did recently on stream, and it was truly as painful as I knew it would be. The Last of Us 2 is truly a product born of spite, of hatred of the audience, of all of the fans who loved Joel from the first game. And I'm not just talking about him dying near the beginning. There's a lot of elements of that game, especially how Ellie treats Joel in the flashbacks, that makes it clear that Druckmann despises all of the people who would dare save their surrogate daughter instead of save what's left of human civilization. Now, I'm not going to go over that again. I think I covered my opinions pretty thoroughly back when I reviewed the first season. But obviously I sided with Joel, and I really despised how the show removed a lot of the ambiguity as to whether or not a cure would even be made by killing Ellie. But still, now we have the aftermath, The Last of Us Part 2. And even though it released 5 years ago now, it still feels like it was yesterday when it was leaked that Joel gets killed in the beginning of the game, and thankfully, the majority of people decided not to buy The Last of Us Part 2. Now, of course, there was a lot of misinformation saying that no, supposedly the game sold extremely well, even though the game sold 4 million copies in its first month, which seems like a lot. But then 2 years later, it had only sold 10 million compared to the first game's 30 million. And no doubt the budget for the second game was much higher. And Naughty Dog even had to cancel the multiplayer-only expansion/standalone release, which is even more evidence that the game bombed horribly. And they've now had to re-release it twice to try and make up for the losses of The Last of Us 2. And knowing all of this, and also knowing the fact that Neil Druckmann is directly working on the TV show as he did with Season 1, I knew that people are going to definitely end up hating Season 2, unless they make drastic changes to the story. And just based on episode 1, it doesn't really seem like they changed much, except a lot of the out-of-order flashbacks that appear later in the game are now in the very first episode. Like the famous dance scene, you know, the one where Dina asks if she smells bad? Oh yeah, that line's still in the show 1-to-1. So clearly Druckmann hasn't learned anything. He still thinks it's hot for two lesbians to smell each other's odor, especially when one is hideously ugly. And I might as well address that before we get started, because there are a lot of morons, a lot of tourists who watched my Season 1 reviews and didn't know that Bella Ramsey was an adult. Yes, she was 19 years old when Season 1 released, and so obviously she's even older now. And no, I don't give a shit if you think I'm a bad person for calling her ugly. We all know she's ugly. It's incredibly distracting, and it really just takes you out of the show. And to address another thing that I know is going to come up, as plenty of people told me I'm racist for pointing it out in my Season 1 review and my Fallout TV show review. Yes, blackwashing and miscegenation are absolutely woke. If it's being shoved into every goddamn TV commercial and movie, despite being a relatively rare phenomenon in real life, you don't think that's propaganda? Can you not think of a single reason why maybe that's being shoved in your face? If you don't understand how that could possibly be part of the message, I don't think you even know what the message is in the first place. But please, continue to listen to these YouTubers who would never lie to you or betray you or try to sell you something. And another thing you need to remember about these people is that apparently watching two middle-aged men have gay sex is not woke as well, apparently, as everyone seemed to love episode 3 of The Last of Us Season 1. So anyway, with that out of the way, I'm pretty sure most people are going to agree with me and hate Season 2 if we're being real, because, well, pretty much everyone hated The Last of Us Part 2, so I can't see how Neil Druckmann is suddenly going to change his ways, especially given what we already know about his next game, Intergalactic, is going to be addressing religion. And I'm not going to spoil the leak plot of that because I don't want to get a copyright takedown, but let's just say it's an allegory for siding with Muslims and killing Christians. And to address one final thing before we get to the episode 1 synopsis, because this is something that came up during my Fallout episode 1 review, there's absolutely nothing wrong with reviewing just episode 1 of a TV show and coming to conclusions based on what you see. Now, of course, it's a little bit different with The Last of Us show because I already know what's going to happen since I played the game and I actually watched all the cutscenes 5 years ago. Shout out to everyone who's been watching the channel since the beginning. But even if they do decide to change things in the plot, it doesn't matter. There's nothing wrong with making a judgment based on what you see in episode 1. In fact, I would say the first episode of a TV show is arguably the most important. This is the one that draws you in and hooks you. So when all of those retards, including Hassan, said that I'm not allowed to judge a TV show based on the first episode, I mean, does that sound like something an intelligent person would say? Or is that something a brain-dead normie would say because they don't know how to counter any of my arguments other than just calling me a racist? But anyway, enough preamble. Let's get into episode 1 of The Last of Us Season 2. So it actually begins with a new scene unique to the show where we get to see the survivors of Joel slaughtering all of the fireflies, and we get to meet the actress who plays Abby. And I'm not going to make a judgment based on her appearance just yet, even though I've already seen pictures of later episodes, and no, she never looks nearly as jacked as Abby, and we all know the reason why. It's because the actress wasn't willing to take steroids to get arms as large as Abby's. Sorry, ladies, I don't care how much chicken, broccoli, and rice you eat, you're never going to get arms like that without anabolics. Morons who have never touched a dumbbell seem to believe that women have just as much muscle building potential as men. It's not even close, guys. So yes, unfortunately, Abby is not the muscle monster that we all know from The Last of Us 2. Which, you know what? If you're not someone who watches any of my streams, maybe you'd think I'd say that's a good thing. But I kind of ironically enjoy how gross Abby looks in the game because it kind of just represents the overall ugliness of The Last of Us 2. The fact that the actress is actually more attractive than Abby kind of just takes away from it. Especially, I think she's the only casting in this show that's more attractive than the game version. And I don't know if that's to subtly make you side with her more, given what comes next after this. But then again, a lot of people really like Pedro Pascal, so him dying in most likely episode 2, if I had to predict. Yeah, spoiler, he doesn't die in the first episode, they pussied out. I don't really think it makes up for it. Now, again, if you don't know my opinion of The Last of Us 2, by the end of the game, I actually sided with Abby over Ellie because Ellie becomes such a fucking bitch in the game, and she does the same in the show. We'll get into that later. Because she just fucking despises Joel for making the correct decision, save her life instead of sacrifice her for a arguably useless cure. Again, not going to get into the same arguments I made back in season 1, but I still feel the same. Ellie is such a goddamn bitch, you end up hating her by the end of The Last of Us 2, trust me. All this scene does is establish who these characters are and justify why they end up chasing after Joel. Then there's a 5-year time skip, and we get to see Jackson once again, which is where Joel's brother Tommy has set up a settlement, and the town has clearly expanded quite a bit in 5 years. There's a shit ton of people here, again, just like the game. And you may have forgotten this, but in season 1, it was established Jackson is a communist utopia.
This is the commune. We're communists.
So I guess communism really does work. All you need is a post-apocalypse to get it started. And I'll be honest, like the next 30 minutes felt like complete filler. It starts off with Ellie beating the shit out of a dude way bigger than her. It looks so fucking ridiculous, man. But it really sets the tone. It sets that feminism wokeness shit right from the beginning, so you know exactly what to expect. Tiny, ugly goblin woman beats the shit out of Chad. And it looks awful, man. It doesn't even look convincing the least bit. And we also get to meet Jesse, the Asian cuck character, who only exists to implant his seed within Dina so that our greatest ally can continue to propagate their species. And you might think I'm joking, but no. Fucking Jesse does nothing in The Last of Us Part 2. He even dies like a bitch, just so that 2 lesbians can raise a half Asian, half Jewish child. Not propaganda, though. That's not woke, according to Fallout show fans. And in the scene right after this, we see Joel interact with Dina, Big Schnauzer's self, except there's only one problem. This woman's nose is normal sized. What? This is the worst miscasting since Ellie. And the only thing I really care about from this scene is that we learn that Joel is going to therapy now. Isn't that a great addition to The Last of Us 2? In the next scene, we see Ellie and Tommy sniping a clicker. I guess this is just to further establish that Ellie is capable and she wants to go out and hunt zombies and shit or whatever. And then in the scene after this, we are reminded that Tommy's wife is black. I actually completely forgot about this. But as you know, race swapping isn't woke, so it's fine. And as you might remember, in season 1, they blackwashed Joel's biological daughter. So it looks like both brothers got jungle fever. And we also see Tommy's kid. Interesting. This is not propaganda, though. I'm just a racist. And we also get another, maybe more subtle piece of propaganda here, that they need to build the town faster so that they can accept more refugees. And Joel says we need to help our own first, very based. And this is treated as a bad thing somehow, because Joel was a refugee. No, he's Tommy's fucking brother. That is not the same thing as letting in, let's just say, strangers from another country who might not share the same cultural values as those in Jackson. Do you think maybe this is allegory for something going on in the world right now about crimes being committed by dangerous refugees from other countries? Nah, I'm just reading into it. Well, the next scene is certainly one of the worst of the episode, where we get to see a humiliation ritual in real time as Joel goes to therapy. And instead of, having a legitimate therapy session where Joel talks about his problems with Ellie, about her ignoring him and just, being bitchy in general, instead, the woman just fucking roasts his ass.
Oh, a 19-year-old daughter. She's acting toward me like every 19-year-old daughter has ever acted toward their dad, ever. What is this, our 5th session? Are you just gonna keep grouching on like this every time?
Aren't you supposed to be validating me or something?
And the justification for this is that Joel killed her husband, Eugene. Now, for the sake of curiosity, I looked up Eugene, The Last of Us wiki, because I'm like, I don't even know who the hell that is. And in the game, it was just a character who was mentioned who died of natural causes. So I guess this is something they're going to reveal in later episodes. But the point is, the therapist hates his ass and obviously knows that Joel is lying about why he's coming there. And she asks if Joel hurt her. And the next line was so predictable that I actually called it. He says, "I saved her." I legitimately fucking shouted at the screen when I called this shit. I'm not even joking. In the next scene, we start setting up the romance between Ellie and Dina, and I don't know, man, this shit's just cringe. I'm not gonna hyper-analyze every single scene. Just know that it felt like filler. And so Ellie, Dina, and some jobbers go out on a recon patrol, and they discover that a grizzly bear has been taken out by a bunch of zombies. Then the no-name morons just let Dina and Ellie go investigate an abandoned supermarket by themselves, where there's 2 clickers inside, so they split up. And we don't even see Dina kill hers, so she's so badass she did it no problem. But we do see Ellie stab her clicker to death, and I don't know, I've got no comment really. The scene's fine, I suppose. But then, just as they're about to escape, Ellie collapses through the floor, and we get introduced to a new zombie type, a stalker. Honestly, I barely even remember this enemy type from the second game. Ultimately, it didn't really matter because the melee combat was so simplistic. You just press L1 to dodge and then press square to counterattack. And that's all you do over and over again until you kill any of the zombies in melee. In fact, the zombies in The Last of Us Part 2 felt like filler about 80% of the time. Ellie gets bit in the process, but thankfully Dina doesn't discover it, and so the duo report back to the Communist Council at Jackson and tell them that the zombies are getting smarter, basically. Then we get a scene where Joel tries to talk to Ellie, basically fails. And then we get the party scene from the E3 trailer, which actually happens in the last 3 hours of the original game. So obviously, they're changing around how they tell these flashbacks. Who knows? Maybe they cut them entirely from the show. But yeah, I don't even know what to say here. It's almost 1-to-1 from The Last of Us Part 2. I mean, I literally just played this part like 2 days ago. Like I said, they still do the, "Oh, do I smell like shit?" line, which is like the least romantic thing you could possibly fucking say. And look, I don't want to harp on this too much, but are we really expected to believe that a cute girl like Dina is into this disgusting goblin butch lesbian? I mean, really? This just takes you out of the experience entirely. And yes, we do have to watch them kiss, as if this whole situation wasn't already repulsive enough. And of course, we still have the old homophobic guy who's like, "Oh, this is a family event." And then Joel just shoves him on his ass, then Ellie freaks the fuck out. Then they actually subvert your expectations because you think they're gonna play the final scene from the original game, but instead Ellie walks to the garage instead of talking to Joel on the porch. Then we get another completely new scene where there's fungus growing in the pipes. So I guess there's gonna be a zombie outbreak in Jackson. And then the episode ends with us seeing Abby and her entourage have finally found Jackson and are most likely going to kill Joel next episode, but who knows, maybe they'll drag it out to episode 3 or even longer. In any case, I expect a severe drop-off in viewership as soon as they kill Pedro Pascal. You know, kind of like all the fucking refunds there were for The Last of Us 2, and for all of us who were smart enough to view the leaks a month beforehand, all the purchases that never happened in the first place. And so that's episode 1 of The Last of Us Season 2. I mean, if I'm being completely honest and judging it in a vacuum, it was just okay. Certainly not as much of a hook as the beginning of the first game, and by extension, the first episode of Season 1. And yes, I had quite a few problems with that adaptation of the beginning of The Last of Us. The race swapping being a big part of that, obviously. But still, the first, 20 minutes of the first game is one of the most effective video game openings of all time. Whereas this episode 1, I mean, what is there even to take away from this? There certainly isn't really any plot hook here, except that Abby is going to come kill Joel, and I feel like that's something that anybody who's heard about the game already knows is going to happen. And for all the normies who don't even play video games, who I guess watch Season 1 are going to watch this, well, like I said, I think there's going to be a huge fucking backlash for all these people living under a rock over the past 5 years. I just can't imagine that people are going to want to sit through the plot of The Last of Us Part 2 in TV show form. I mean, it is truly torture, dude. The gameplay was the best part of The Last of Us 2. Now, I don't think it's as good as a lot of fucking people have claimed. It's no Metal Gear Solid 5 or whatever stupid ass shit you've seen journalists and shills say, but the gameplay of The Last of Us 2 is definitely better than the first game, and there are times when it is fun. This is a TV show, there is no gameplay. The story of The Last of Us 2 is fucking misery and suffering, and all for a really terribly told revenge is bad message. Or, you know, if you want to be a little pretentious, you could say it's actually about forgiveness. What is there to fucking forgive? Joel did nothing wrong, okay? If you need to forgive Joel, you're fucking scum. Ellie kills 100 people over the course of The Last of Us 2, and she doesn't even get her revenge in the end. One of the least satisfying endings in video game history, on top of all the other problems it has. But whatever, I'm getting ahead of myself. Obviously, I'm going to be covering the rest of the season. I don't think I'm going to review every episode, because I doubt every episode will be eventful, but if Joel dies next episode, you better believe I'll cover it. So yeah, I don't really have too much else to say. We just gotta wait and see how the season develops. So that's about it. I'll see you next time, guys.